Hey, I'm Clint Garrett, Ace Networker, and in this second video in our network switches and switching series, we're going to discover the three switch functions at layer 2. Now, these are the three primary things that most layer 2 switches do in any networking environment. Now, this video is going to be one of the most important, if not the most important, that you will ever watch out of all of the videos that I make, because when you learn these three switch functions at layer 2, you learn the foundational understanding of computer networks in general. And if you learn about network switches, especially layer 2 devices, layer 2 switches, you're going to have a foundation that you can build on with the rest of your computer networking knowledge. All of the other technologies, all of the other protocols will become that much easier for you to learn, grasp, and understand. So make switches your foundation, because switches are really what run most networks, local area networks. So without wasting any more time, let's get to it. Are you ready? And when I say perform, I mean when traffic, ones and zeros, when traffic first arrives on a port, on a switch, a physical port on the outside of the switch, and it arrives from some other computer or switch or router on the network that's connected on that port, the switch has to do one or more of these three things with that traffic and information. It's going to do address learning, or it's going to do forward filter or forwarding filtering decisions. It's going to make those decisions. And the third thing is it's going to be avoiding loops in what they call loop avoidance. So address learning, forwarding and filtering decisions, and loop avoidance. What are these exactly, you may be asking? Well, let's get into the basics, and like all my other content, you can delve deeper, as I may in the near future with my content here. You can delve deeper into each of these topics to learn more about how they each work exactly. But I'm just going to touch on the basics here, and we can go from there. So the first thing a layer 2 switch does is it learns the addresses of all of the devices connected to it. If you want more detail on how it does this, make sure to check out this video where I run down how it learns those addresses, or how a switch learns those addresses. Now, it's not following people home and getting home addresses. We're talking about the hardware address from each of those connected devices, or the better known as the MAC addresses of the NIC cards from each of those devices connected to the switch. It learns those by looking at incoming frames that were sent by those devices, reading the source MAC address. The address of the device that sent the frame out is in its source address when it creates the frame and ships it out to the switch, or out onto the network. And recording that MAC address into what we call the filter table on the switch's memory. More often than not, it's called the filter table, but it's sometimes referred to as the MAC table, or the MAC address table, or simply the address table. Those are all pretty much synonymous. It's the same filtering table that the switch learns and memorizes. The memory of all those recorded MAC addresses retrieved from the source address in the incoming frames. A switch performs this function of learning MAC addresses from incoming frames to allow it to be extremely efficient in handling future traffic. And we're not talking about an all-day process here on most switches. The MAC address of those connected devices are recorded into the filter table within just a few seconds to minutes after all those connected devices are powered on and they start talking to the switch. And that leads us to the next function a layer 2 switch performs: forwarding and filtering decisions. So once a switch learns that the MAC addresses from each incoming frame on a port, it associates that learned MAC address with that physical port, and this helps it forward and filter future incoming frames or traffic by examining the destination MAC address on the frame and comparing that destination MAC address to the MAC addresses it's already learned in its filter table from all of the source addresses and all of the frames it's received. So if the destination MAC address on an incoming frame matches the MAC address in the switch's filter table, it will forward that frame out the physical port or interface it knows that device with that address is connected to, and it will not send that frame out any other interfaces. Now, really quickly, if the switch reads the destination MAC address on an incoming frame, and that MAC address does not match anything in its own filter table, then what the switch does is it will forward that frame out all the other interfaces except the interface that the frame arrived to on the switch. Again, if you'd like a more in-depth explanation, feel free to watch this video where I go into more detail about that process. Last but not least, the third function a layer 2 switch performs is called loop avoidance. When we say loop, we're actually talking about a physical loop that's been created, either intentionally or unintentionally, on the local area network. Now, this could be caused by 2 or more cables between this switch and an adjacent switch, or it could be a bigger loop that exists across the entire LAN. I've seen scenarios more often than not in real life where loops are created by a technician or an administrator saying, hey, we need a connection between this switch and this switch, so they'll connect a cable between them. What they don't realize is they're actually making a physical loop around their entire network, so that traffic is able to reach those same switches and devices through multiple paths. Regardless of how or why those loops exist, one of the primary functions of a switch is to detect these loops and to avoid or prevent them from continuing to exist, because loops allow repeated replication and multiplication of broadcast frames or packets to a point where a network is unable to function or pass traffic. And this can happen within a very short few seconds to a few minutes in most cases. But a network can get to where it's unable to function or pass traffic because it's overloaded by broadcast after broadcast after broadcast. The protocol that runs on a switch to detect and avoid these network loops is called STP, and that's an acronym for Spanning Tree Protocol. To understand this more fully, check out this video I made previously on Spanning Tree Protocol and how it works. Essentially, Spanning Tree Protocol works by detecting existing loops in the network and determining to block one or more interfaces that help to create that loop. And that's to prevent traffic from repeating over and over again, like we were talking about, within that loop. So it shuts that loop down before that broadcast storm, or what they refer to as broadcast radiation, can occur. And those are the 3 switch functions at layer 2. Again, if you learn the concept about these 3 primary switch functions, you will have a foundation that you can build upon with all of the other technologies, all of the other protocols, everything else that's involved. Now you may be saying, Clint, what about VLANs? What about all the other protocols that run on switches? What about the different access levels when we're running a command line, or when we're programming a switch, or when we're looking at log files? We're going to get into all of that later on, but you need to understand these 3 primary functions on a layer 2 switch. Now, if you have not yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, click below to subscribe. Make sure you also click the bell if you want to be notified when my next videos come out. And believe me, I've got a series of them coming out here with a lot more protocols, a lot more technologies to show you all the basics of computer networking so you can pass the Network Plus exam, and even really go beyond that if you really want to. We're going to possibly be getting into some technologies that will be more along the lines of Cisco Certified Network Associate, Certified Network Professional, and that type of thing. So be watching for those as we go along. Also, if you haven't checked out the free cheat code workshop, I'm going to be showing you how to score 30% or higher on the Network Plus exam without really knowing much about any of the other technologies at all. But the workshop is going to give you some basic need-to-know things, as well as a cheat code that's going to help you advance that much faster, score that much higher. So make sure to get in on that, and I will see you in the next video.